The National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C. has reopened after a breathtaking top-to-bottom renovation. And we're celebrating the voices and achievements of women artists from around the world. Visit now to see Suchitra Matai, Myth from Matter, a new exhibition of richly layered and vibrant paintings, sculptures, and installations that use saris, vintage needlepoints, jewelry, and bindis to imagine a past that lifts up women and people of color. Tickets at nmwa.org. That's nmwa.org.
Today on CityCast DC, with new development and waterfront dining, the Washington Post dubbed Buzzard Point DC's trendiest new neighborhood this past summer. But longtime residents of the area may have concerns about just how Buzzard Point is being developed. Emeka Moneme, the president of the Capital Riverfront Business Improvement District, is here to explain what Buzzard Point means for DC. Plus, do you know your French wine? How about French spirits? By the end of today's episode, you'll be in the know. Our sponsor, Alliance Francaise, is here to share insider secrets about both and give you the scoop on exciting events they have lined up this fall. Today is Thursday, September 26th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, Emeka.
Hey, how you doing, Michael?
I'm good. It's good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
So you are the president of the Capital Riverfront Business Improvement District, BID.
I am. I started almost to the day a year ago.
So the Capital Riverfront, that's a relatively new name. The people didn't used to talk about Capital Riverfront, but it's a name that is sort of descriptive of where it is. It's on the riverfront, folks. A lot of people may not know within that where exactly Buzzard Point is.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah, Capital Riverfront, the name comes from right south of the Capitol on the river. And Buzzard Point is the neighborhood, and most people do know the marker of the Nationals baseball stadium, Nationals ballpark. That's a good marker that people do know. It's all of the land to the south and to the west of the baseball stadium that goes from essentially the soccer field, Audi Field, where DC United and the Washington Spirit play, all the way down to the tip of that peninsula bounded by Fort McNair, just to its west, and all the lands to the east. It's a rapidly developing residential enclave right there on the Anacostia River. We think it's going to be a really special addition to the Capital Riverfront mix.
So you're a person in charge of promoting business, and I'm curious, since it's a neighborhood that itself or that your organization sort of reflects a rebranding of name, a lot of people might not think of the words Buzzard Point necessarily connote something that you should feel optimistic about. Have you guys thought about renaming it?
No. You know what? I actually had this conversation with the developers that were going there, and they said that they've embraced the kind of the grittiness of the name because it definitely is gritty and reflects that. It's distinctive. It captures your attention. And I think that once you spend just a little bit of time there, whether it's going down for a soccer match or Broccoli City, which happened a couple of weeks ago, and you take in the restaurants that are right there on the water. And I actually just toured the development that Acrid is putting up now that really is going to start to give some real shape and form to it. It's a really special place. And I think that the dissonance of a name like Buzzard Point with the beautiful architecture and the great public spaces and the great amenities there, it'll kind of create a place in your mind that you won't forget.
So the first time I went there was when the Coast Guard, I think it was, still had its headquarters there. And it was sort of it was a pretty grim, bureaucratic building and not much around it. Can you sort of paint a picture for people who may not have been there recently or ever of sort of what it looks like, what's there, what's to recommend it?
Yeah, no, Michael, that's a good point, because really most of Capital Riverfront was actually like Buzzard Point. It was kind of these forgotten federal agencies that were located there, some industrial uses that were on the water the way that we used to do. Riverfront development back in the days, we put all the uses we didn't want to see kind of back of house. That neighborhood now, you've got a lot of glass and steel, both condominiums, apartment buildings. Buzzard Point has two really great sitting on the riverfront restaurants with verandas and decks that spill right across the water. There's a marina that's run by the National Park Service. It sits just right next to the development on the west. And it's all connected back to the kind of the core of the Capital Riverfront, the Navy Yard area on the South Capitol Street corridor, the new Frederick Douglass Memorial Bridge, the really iconic white bridge there. And then that big, massive oval just south of the stadium. that neighborhood is going to be, I think it's going to be really special. It's going to have its own distinct character. Our job is to make sure that it's both connected from a mobility standpoint to the rest of the neighborhood and the city. And then we also do our best to support the businesses and then market it so people begin to know that it's a place to go to and a place that's a part of our neighborhood.
And the sales pitch is basically, look, there are these new glass and steel condo buildings, and if you live in one of them, you can walk to stadiums, you can walk to the Navy Yard, you can walk to all these restaurants and amenities, and that's your guys' pitch, I assume.
It is. It's actually, if you think about all the new development north of M Street from the baseball stadium, there's really kind of maybe eight-story tall buildings that kind of seem like they popped up overnight over the last 5 to 7 years. This is a version of that, but to the south and to the west. It basically sits right adjacent to that core sports and entertainment district that we have with Nationals Ballpark and Audi Field. But it also gives you the ability to have this kind of almost a residential enclave that can have access to that when you want it. If you don't want it, you can kind of stay in your neighborhood. But on the days that you want to go and partake of the restaurants and the energy of that kind of core entertainment district, it's right there too.
So, like going way back when they redeveloped Southwest DC in the 50s and 60s, and it was a rather beautiful row house neighborhood, but in the culture of the 50s and 60s, they just defined that as slum. And a lot of buildings got torn down, people got displaced, and this new Southwest was put up, but the kind of dividing line was like 2nd or 3rd Street or something. And basically you had poor people to the east of that and middle class, wealthier people to the west of that. So now, as Buzzard Point gets developed, that sort of brings in fairly pricey residential east of there. Has there been any concern about displacement and maintaining some of the economic diversity in the neighborhood?
Yeah, 100%. I think that issue very much top of mind. I'd say there's two things. The first thing that is quite interesting is you're right. There was quite a bit of displacement, especially back in the urban renewal issues around the 395 freeway. But for the rest of the neighborhood, or at least most of the neighborhood, there wasn't actually any residents there, right? A lot of it was industrial uses, back of office stuff, as I mentioned before, parking lots for school buses. So the actual displacement issues were not as acute. Now, you could make the argument there's displacement of some uses that were there that were valued by the community. But I think what the district did, which was smart and strategic in its foresight, was the zoning that was done just before this development started had inclusionary zoning. It required affordability to kind of be baked in. And so we're watching this neighborhood come together with those policies around affordability and ensuring there's a diversity of incomes in the neighborhood are baked into it. What we can do in partnership with our residential, the building owners, is to try to make sure that it's as authentic and as diverse as it can be and reflects our city as well as the preferences of the people that both live and visit there.
So who are the developers and as the president of the Business Improvement District, you work for the businesses. Who are they? Who are the big players in the neighborhood, either on the retail or dining hospitality front or the residential development front?
Well, I'll speak to, so the core of the neighborhood did start with the yards, right? The development just to the east of the baseball stadium, and that was Forest City back in the day, and Brookfield is now the company that acquired that property. So they play a really big role in the neighborhood. And you're familiar with W.C. Smith, a really big player, but specifically in Southeast DC with stuff around the Arc. They have a pretty big both office and residential presence in our neighborhood. On Buzzard Point, you have a combination of MRP is one of the big players, and they just actually released another site that's moving towards development, and then Ackridge, which is a pretty well-known local DC developer, is another big developer, along with Douglas there on Buzzard Point. So what I do think is special, specifically about Buzzard Point, is you do have a lot of DC kind of oriented developers that know the city, that know its history, that are committed to the city, and really take to heart the desire to be authentic and really dig in and understand it, and not just kind of drop in something kind of out of this planet. They really wanted to work with the fabric and have a long-term viability.
Paint Care is all about keeping it simple for district residents. They make recycling leftover paint, stain, and varnish easy with convenient drop-off locations like your local paint or hardware store. Each new paint project is an opportunity to reduce waste, and Paint Care has 3 simple rules for painting smarter. 1, buy the right amount of paint for the job. 2, use up leftover paint, and 3, recycle the rest. Visit paintcare.org/3simplerules to get tips on how to buy the right amount of paint, explore ideas for DIY projects for how to use up leftover paint, and look up your nearest drop-off site in the district. The National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C. has reopened after a breathtaking top-to-bottom renovation, and we're celebrating the voices and achievements of women artists from around the world. Visit now to see Suchitra Matai, Myth from Matter, a new exhibition of richly layered and vibrant paintings, sculptures, and installations that use saris, vintage needlepoints, jewelry, and bindis to imagine a past that lifts up women and people of color. Tickets at nmwa.org. That's nmwa.org. I've got some exciting news for you theater lovers across D.C. The Peabody Institute of the Johns Hopkins University is going big to celebrate 1 year of performances at the Bloomberg Center, D.C.'s newest venue for music and dance. They're putting on a bunch of free shows this fall. I'm talking orchestra, jazz, and opera performances, all presented by talented Peabody faculty, students, and alumni. So for example, at the end of September, I'm really excited about the Polyaspora Festival, which centers Black and Brazilian perspectives in contemporary music. Or in October, there's the Democracy Day show. It's all happening at 555 Pennsylvania Avenue. And again, believe it or not, this is all free. But tickets are required, so explore the full concert calendar and reserve your spots now at washingtondc.jhu.edu.
I'm curious about what sort of residential is there now and is going in if everything goes according to plan. I think of a lot of the neighborhoods in DC that have been turned around or sort of created where there used to just be, industrial use. And there's a lot of beautiful housing, but it's a lot more 1 and 2 bedroom than more than that. And it's sort of a better city in that way for empty nesters or young childless folks. If you move to Buzzard Point in your 20s and are thrilled with it, and then you make a family, is there like physical infrastructure for you to stick around? Is there any critical mass, or will there be any critical mass of places with more than 2 bedrooms?
Well, we hope so, right? So I think you're right. A lot of them are going to be 1 and 2 bedrooms. We do have on Buzzard Point, so the Volunteers of America, VOA, is a really big presence. They have an office plan on that location. They have senior housing plan there, along with an entertainment complex. One of the other things that we do think that does work in our advantage is that we are adjacent to Capitol Hill, which is a great place for families with options as it relates to row houses. Expensive as they may be, they are there. And then secondly, one of the goals, I think, for our neighborhood is to take the prosperity and the investment here on the west bank of the Anacostia River and kind of close the divide that the Anacostia River has been for decades in the city, and allow Anacostia to be a place where people potentially think about, growing their families, being a viable option for them to kind of move up the housing food chain, so to speak, when it's time. So I think that if we let that river continue to be a boundary, it's going to be one of the challenges we'll face. So we really want to embrace the opportunity of making both sides of the Anacostia River kind of hug this neighborhood.
And with Buzzard Point, as the name indicates, it's a point, which also means it's probably kind of a hike to Metro. Just that is in the nature of points. They're out there. What's the transit look like now, and what might it look like in the future?
Good question. So we are fortunate. So for better or for worse, I make this walk pretty regularly. I'm a season ticket holder for DC United, so I get to make the trek. It's about a little bit less than a half mile from the Navy Yard Metro and the Waterfront Mall station. So the stadium itself is pretty accessible by Metro. That's not too bad. The second thing that the District Department of Transportation has been working on for years, as you may be familiar with, is the Anacostia Riverwalk Trail. It's to really kind of knit together bicycle and walking trails along the west and the east side of the Anacostia River. We're hopeful that within the next 24 months, some of the missing segments in Buzzard Point will be connected. While we're ambitious and hopeful that we can come to some agreement with the Army to go all the way around Buzzard Point and continue up to the wharf in Southwest, there will be some connection that gets you over to Southwest. I got four things. The third one is the South Capitol Street corridor. One of the things that has made, frankly, this neighborhood, and I'm talking about the Capitol Riverfront BID more broadly, happen over the last 20 years, has been the massive investment in transportation infrastructure, both the 11th Street Bridge, the South Capitol Street Bridge, and the Frederick Douglass Bridge, and the South Capitol Street corridor. We are hopeful that the city's working to kind of make those final investments to really kind of create the South Capitol Street urban boulevard concept that's always been talked about, to kind of make that barrier, that freeway that it was before, a little bit more porous and make the neighborhood feel a little bit more integrated. And the last thing that I'll speak to, both the Southwest BID, my partner to the west, and the Capitol Riverfront are part of something called the Mobility Innovation District. This is a partnership with the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development in the city, where we're basically defined our neighborhoods as a place to test new technologies, test new mobility solutions, and see if we can find creative ways to deliver mobility and access to residents and visitors. And one of the things that we've been piloting for the last year is a smaller scale shuttle that actually gets people in the neighborhood another option in addition to Metro Rail, in addition to Metro Bus, to kind of make those trips, whether it's to the grocery store, to shopping locations, just to kind of ease the reliance on single occupancy vehicles. And we've got a really good partnership working with the DC Central Kitchen, and we're hoping to bring others in to see if we can scale this into kind of a range of mobility options. Because I think that you're right. Being on a peninsula is not typically great for visibility and access. It does help you feel kind of enclave-ish when you want to, but even some people in an enclave want to get to places. They want to get to things they need. And so we're looking at all those things, because it's not going to be one magic bullet unless we as a region decide we want to build Metro Rail there. And I'm not holding my breath for that solution. So these other range of solutions is where we're leading into.
Yeah, those renderings of South Capitol Street as a boulevard are pretty amazing. I mean, we're so accustomed to seeing it as a pretty forbidding stretch of road, and it's a nice dream at any rate. But wait, so tell me, if you knock it out of the park at the BID, paint me a picture. What does it look like? What does success look like in 10 years from now?
I'd say the first thing is that we would kind of get right this balance between what the neighborhood today is. It's a regional destination. When the Nats have a game in the neighborhood's electric, right? There's people everywhere. The energy is great. The same can be said for Audi Field, and it will continue to get better as it grows. But within our BID, so that's a district within our district, I tend to see that around that kind of core entertainment district is the residential neighborhood. That's really where the people live. And they go to work in our city and they come back there and spend their free time. My hope is in 10 years, we get that balance just right? So that people can both be a part of that energy if they want to or not, but still have all the amenities and access of a great neighborhood. It's a 15-minute walkable, live, work, play neighborhood. And I want to kind of get that balance right. So that's one thing that I'd speak to. Two, we've made investments in this neighborhood, as I mentioned before, around infrastructure. I think one of the things we're learning as we look at kind of other parts of the city is that you do need to keep making investments to allow it to remain competitive. So there are still some things that we need to do, particularly around the water, that we want to see happen, whether it's South Capitol Street, it's the 11th Street Bridge Park coming online, which I think will be an important connection across the bridge. And then I guess the last piece is kind of that hugging of both sides of the river. And I think the third thing I speak to is that while we are a business improvement district, we also recognize that quality of life of our neighborhood residents is another really important part. So having an agenda and a set of programs that really make it feel like a community and not just a neighborhood. I tell the team is that a neighborhood is a place on a map that you can point to. A community is a place where people share values and come together. And so we really want to build a community here and not just a neighborhood. The last piece I'll just offer is that I think that Buzzard Point is just another piece of the Capitol Riverfront's kind of crown in terms of we are definitely a contributor to the growth of the city. I think that over the last couple of years, especially post-COVID, we've talked a lot about how our downtown areas have kind of been challenged. And what we've seen is that because of the way that our neighborhood's designed, the way that we've really kind of smartly integrated these entertainment and sports facilities into an urban environment, we've been able to kind of leverage that and the fact that it still feels like a place, a community, and not just, a sea of parking around a stadium to generate energy and tax revenue that supported the city going forward. So the neighborhood's definitely arrived. It's not an emerging neighborhood anymore. It's definitely arrived. And I think with Buzzard Point coming online the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to just see even more of that.
Emeka, thank you so much for being with us.
All right. Thank you for your time. I really enjoyed it.
And listener, don't go anywhere. In just a second, our sponsor, Alliance Française, is about to reveal 3 events you have to attend this fall, celebrating the finer things in life. Stick around.
Hey, I'm CityCast Priyanka Tilve here with Sarah Diligenty. She's Alliance Française's executive director. Sarah, so good to see you again.
Good to see you again, Priyanka. Thanks for inviting me again.
Yeah, of course. I was actually just thinking about you because the other day I was at a restaurant in DC and we were looking at the wine list. There were a bunch of French wines. And every time I encounter something where I'm like, I don't understand this French thing, or I don't know enough about this French thing, I think of Alliance Française.
Well, yeah, we're here to help. We could educate people about wine, about French language and French culture.
Yeah, actually, on the subject of wine, do you have anything coming up? Do you do events about wine and alcohol? I know about the language classes and stuff, but what about wine and spirits?
Actually, we have one on October 17. We have a spirit tasting. It's nothing to do with Halloween, not that kind of spirit. It's a hard alcohol.
Yeah.
It's 3 different Armagnac, 3 different cognac, and 3 different rum, and all of them are aged or in different ways. So we have a guided spirit tasting with Maison Baron François. They are quite famous for this kind of tasting. So we're happy to have them on the 17th of October at Alliance Française.
Who is the person leading the class? Like, what are their qualifications?
Well, Mahé is from the southwest of France, like me, is born and bred, I would say, in vineyards around Bordeaux.
Wow.
So that is very important. So he has a very good nose, and he knows a lot about the region and the wine. So he has a training into that, thanks to his family and also professionally.
Okay, very cool. How much does the event cost?
It's 65 for members and 75 for non-members. It's a small fundraiser for us. And there will be nibbles, okay? Because I'm not going to let everybody taste all these spirits without any food.
Okay, yeah. Very smart. Very smart.
I would say it's better to have dinner before, because this is the kind of spirit that you will have, especially cognac and Armagnac, after dinner.
Okay. So for the authentic experience.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's cool. I love that you do that. What other kinds of events do you guys have that aren't language classes coming up soon?
On the September 19th, we have a very interesting event all about nuclear power and sustainable development. We will have the nuclear advisor of the French embassy in DC that will be here coming to talk to us about this topic, because I remember the time when 1979 I was in Ohio. I was an exchange student, and there was a 3 Mile Island incident that was before Chernobyl. Okay, Chernobyl was 1986, and I remember how they kept us inside for a few days because they didn't know whether there had been such a big leak or anything. And nowadays, with climate change, we may have to rethink nuclear power to try to use it to help with climate change. So that's going to be a very interesting conversation and presentation.
Wow. Yeah. The range of events that you have astounds me. That's so different from wines and spirits.
We have some events in French, some events in English, because we like, people think that, Alliance Française, they speak in English about France. No, but we do have to have events in French for those who want to practice their French and to listen to more French. But we also have events in English for those people who are fascinated or interested by French culture in general, or the French-speaking world in general, but they don't have the level, at language level required to understand that kind of conversation in French directly. So that's why we mix. We have 50% events in English and 50% events in French.
Okay, so we've got climate change and nuclear power. We've got wines and spirits. Give me one more event. What else do you have coming up the pike?
We have a fantastic event coming up on the 10th of October, which may change the history, the architectural history, and certainly the diplomatic history of DC. Because we have one of our dear member and former student, Skip Mosky, who is a historian. He's already written a book about the Anderson House, where the Society of Cincinnati is based. But he discovered the four houses in which the first French diplomatic couple lived in DC between 1801 and 1805. And that is about to make waves in DC. That's all I can say.
Oh man, that's a real teaser. Okay. I have so many questions, but I guess I have to come to the event. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and they will be in English, so you will understand everything.
Okay. All right, Sarah, you've left me on the edge of my seat here. Where can people find all of the events that you offer?
They can find them on our website at www.francedc.org.
Sarah, thanks so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Again, check out francedc.org to learn more. We'll have that link in our show notes as well, so you're just a click away. Thanks for listening.
And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.